have said a few times, we have to look at this and we have to look at that and we have to expand this and we have to do this in the departments of religion. Who is the we you're talking about? I mean, there is an Indian academic and Indian elite who's very much part of this discourse. But there is the Indian masses who've really not given a toss about this. In reality, this is why departments of religion don't work here. If you qualify in a department of religion in, say, Britain, as a Christian, you could probably get a job as a priest if there's nothing else. You qualify as in the department of religion in India, nobody's going to give you a job in a mandir or a gurdwara. And, the Sikhs have a very institutionalized system in the gurdwaras, yet nobody qualified from any of the departments have ever been able to even get near to those institutions, because there isn't the reception within the masses for the descriptions that they're talking about. Yeah? And I just wonder whether when you're talking we, and I said this morning that I feel that I've come to a discussion which is limited by its own discourse. And wouldn't it be easier for him to say, let's see what they're saying? How do they perceive us? How do they perceive your limitations, the ones that you want to expand? And I think from the Sikhs, for instance, it is interesting. I don't see the tensions between, for instance, the Sikhs and the Indian state has never really been about territory. It's about the secularity of the Indian nation that the Sikhs find very difficult to accept, find very uncomfortable. And yet, if you ask the Sikhs, do you want a religious state? They will say no. They haven't quite articulated what they're looking for, but whenever the secularity of the nation tends to hit them hard, they fight back. And there's a cycle here about every 20 years. There's a tension, there's violence in Punjab, because the secularity of the nation doesn't hit them. Thirdly, somebody talked yesterday, I think, what's in a word if the concepts are going to be the same? Well, you might call it a dharma instead of religion. The point here is that we are, in this century and most of the last century, in the nation-state reality of politics. It doesn't serve the Indian state or the Indian administration to have a whole new paradigm which is going to try and occupy the public space. Because it has to be marginalized within the personal domain. Otherwise it challenges, as we the Sikhs continue to challenge it in Punjab. That is the tension between us and the Indian state, which hasn't arisen in the rest of India in that forcefully. So imagine if it occurs in a wider aspect. Will the Indian state allow you to have a description which is wider than the concept of religion? Maybe you might choose the word dharma, so what? You might be able to study it a bit more flexibly. Are you conceptually going to change the whole state system in India? And lastly, and if you do, let us say you manage to shift it without the alternative concept of what the state from this, the politics from this emerges, are you not going to walk into the trap of Hindutva? This is what they're looking for. They're challenging the secular state and to anchor the whole thrust on something which was, the Hindu Mahasabha has been here for 100 years. So they've never really got into this discourse about Hinduism being a religion. They've always seen it as something more than a religion. But as somebody pointed out this morning, or yesterday, that they haven't really been great intellectuals. There's Arun Shourie and people like that, but they haven't quite intellectualized or articulated what they are, what the alternative is. And you might walk in to give it on the plate to them. So, those are sort of, and lastly, coming back to the Sikhs, I think there's a telling thing that one of the sad things about Indian academics is they can always tell you something. There can be very good experts in some obscure philosopher in Europe. I can tell you, you can talk to them and they can tell you everything about some obscure philosopher in Europe, but they can't tell you about things in India. In the 16th century, the 10th Guru said, he's starting a Tisar Panth, the third Panth. He wasn't talking a mixture between Islam and Hinduism, because Buddhism was there, Jainism was there, Islam was there, and he'd already met Christianity. He'd already recognized there were two very alternative systems, and there was a third system that he had created. You know, the solutions, I mean, that may be just the Sikhs, but there's the Kabirs. There's so much stuff here within India. You just now start to look into your own history, into your own civilization. Maybe spend more time in India. You might discover what the answers you're looking for.
I was unsure. I mean, when the last speakers pointed out that we are a very small and basically unimportant group of people here, which I would agree with, and the vast majority of Indian people really couldn't care what we're talking about. That may be true, I don't know, but I was interested that the way that you put your point was to say that Sikhs are very uncomfortable with the secular state, but on the other hand, they wouldn't want a religious state either. And I think that indicates that actually the Sikhs, like many other Indian people, have a constitutional separation of religion and the secular, which they don't actually want, according to you. But that is precisely what we're talking about, isn't it? I mean, that's the kind of cognitive imperialism that we're talking about, because even if the vast majority of people never think about religion, it's actually in the Constitution. So it's a legal issue. Right. So we're in agreement then, in fact. Okay, good.
Yeah, I think your points are excellent. I'll just respond a couple of times. The we that I was talking about has to do with this group. That's what I was referring to. So I think the next step of who the we is crucial, because the we is going to change with every project, right? So what the we is of establishing some new discourse on the study of religion is going to look completely different, and some of us would, I think, out of ethical grounding and post-colonial ethics, absent ourselves until such time as we were useful and invited. I think it's crucial, in fact, that that's the case. So that's the we that I was using was specifically this group, but the next we, or the next 10 we's, entirely based on what the project is and what would be appropriate for those voices. So that would be the first response. Second, I think what you're saying about they perceiving us is absolutely essential. And I see my obligation is to the United States. I want to see you. Most primarily, that is to say, how do we do exactly what you're talking about? We here now means United States and scholars within the United States, to start thinking about the experience of minorities in the United States vis-a-vis the so-called democratic nation, right, which we are constantly struggling with. So in fact, one of the ways that I have written about this is that I think many folks in the United States, intellectual elites, need to live an entire life of reparation. That means not just monetary reparation, it means literary reparation, it means any number of other things. If we're going to reverse the question in precisely the way you're talking about, there's only one possibility, right? And so that's to bring home even further what you're saying, and I can only speak, or I can speak best about the American context. So that would be the second thing. The third, I actually loved the way that you were thinking about changing the whole state system. It's like, oh wow, it's even a possibility. We could think about it. I'm much more pessimistic than you that we could ever do that. But I guess what I'd like to say is that in a way, even though we're very unimportant, and I agree with Tim completely, and Richard was talking about the sort of sense of aggrandizement that even scholars who talk in the media may have very little effect in the long run. I still think that creating alternative spaces to both media discourse about religion and state discourse about religion is absolutely essential. I don't really care if we call them departments, we don't have to, but creating alternative spaces which are protected and which things can be said that cannot be said or would not be sanctioned by either the state or the media for business capitalist reasons or for state reasons is absolutely essential. So that's the way I think about it. Thank you for your comments, they're great.